Welcome. Welcome to episode six. Six. That's right. Part six of our Turning the Page, a self guided Recovery Dharma book study where we're going through the entirety of the Recovery Dharma workbook. And I say this in each of the videos for those who are randomly stumbling upon our videos. If you don't have a copy of the book, get a copy of the book. Get a copy of the book. There's a link for a free PDF of the Recovery Dharma PDF in the description down below. And if you're not familiar with Recovery Dharma, it is a Buddhist-inspired approach to recovery from addictions of all kinds. So if you're suffering from addiction to alcohol, to drugs, to harmful behaviors, what's called process addictions, we're here to help you out. In this 12-part series, we're going through the entirety of the Recovery Dharma workbook together. And in this episode, we're going to talk about the longest chapter in the book. So I got a lot to get to. So we're just going to cut to the chase. This week, we're talking about wise intention. Let's talk about that. Okay. Wise intention. We've got a lot to cover today. For those who are new to the video series, the structure of these videos is pretty straightforward. Each week, I cover the main themes of any given video or given section of the book. Potato there. From there, I highlight various things out of my Recovery Dharma workbook that I have highlighted in my book. Hopefully, you're reading along as you go through this self-guided book study, and you are highlighting and taking notes of yourself, and you're comparing them against what I'm sharing, and you're having some internal commentary on there. And then point three, each episode, each video, I'll also be sharing personal experiences. I'll be sharing personal experiences from 4+ years of working the Recovery Dharma program. I've started a number of Recovery Dharma in-person meetings. I've worked with a number of individuals as a mentor. I've worked with countless wise friends over the last 4 years. And I've got 15+ years of lived experience in recovery communities of all types. So this is one wise friend helping another wise friend on your recovery journey. Wherever you're at geographically, wherever you're at in your recovery, the hope, the aspiration of these videos is to help you get a better grasp of what it means to be in a Buddhist-inspired recovery program, to walk you through the Recovery Dharma book. And should there not be an in-person meeting near you, and or available mentorship or wise friends in your local community, to give you that encouragement and support, to say, hey, you too can take a Buddhist approach to recovery from addictions of all kind. You too can make this work wherever you're at geographically, wherever you're at in your recovery process. So that's of interest to you. Come along for the ride. We're halfway through. So this week we're talking about wise intention. Wise intention is the longest section of the book. So we're going to have a slightly different format this week. We're still doing those three main points that I just talked about. But in this week, we're going to talk about first, highlight a couple quotes from the book, get a book definition of what wise intention means. From there, I'm going to cover what are the heart practices. Like the majority of this chapter of wise intention is about this thing called the heart practices, or the Brahma Viharas, loving kindness, compassion, appreciative joy. Sound familiar? If you've read the chapter, it does. And then we're going to wrap up this video with an entire segment dedicated to forgiveness. That's right, forgiveness, the most nuanced, most sensitive, and arguably the most important part of a Buddhist recovery process. So all that said, we have a lot to cover in today's video. I hope you're along for the ride. First off, let's get a book definition. Okay, so book definition, page 20, wise intention. Wise intention describes the attitude or approach we take towards ourselves and the world. We can choose non-harming by avoiding actions that have harmful results, detaching from the cravings that seem overwhelming in the moment, and developing a kind and compassionate stance towards ourselves and the world. Heck yeah. Wise intention leads us to stop doing things based on confusion, ill will, hatred, violence, and selfishness. It impacts all our relationships with ourselves, other people, our community, and the world as a whole. Wise intention is deciding to act in ways that produce good karma, and avoid actions that produce bad karma. That ties in with wise understanding, the first fold that we just covered, and the whole concept of cause and effect, cultivating positive, healthy, beneficial things versus negative, harmful, unbeneficial, or unhealthy actions. We start by looking at the kinds of thoughts that cause us to act in wise or unwise ways. You can also say skillful or unskillful. Sometimes I'm more comfortable with the translation skillful or unskillful ways. If our thoughts are based on confusion, fear, and greed, then our actions will bring bad results and create harm. If our thoughts are based on generosity, compassion, and avoiding clinging, then our actions will bring good results. Thoughts that are based in loving kindness and goodwill, that are free from the desire and intention to cause harm, lead us to act in a beneficial manner. And I'll wrap up on this, the last line. This one normally gets a little bit of attention in the in-person meetings. There may be times when we don't necessarily want to act in a beneficial manner. We may know the right thing to do, but we just don't want to do it. It's in these moments that we can focus on our intention. Yeah, wise intention. It's behind every action, every speech, every word we speak, everything we do. There's an intention, there's a motive, and it's looking at the motive behind our actions. And wise intention strikes deep to my heart today. It strikes probably the deepest to my heart of the eightfolds of the eightfold path. In that, when I first got to Buddhist recovery, this fold of the path, full disclosure, completely overlooked it. Wise intention, whose needs that? Like before I got to Buddhist recovery, I really didn't look at the intentions behind my actions and the things I was doing that closely. I always thought I was a pretty good person. I thought I acted fairly kindly for the most part. But I remember being about 60, 90 days into Buddhist recovery and doing a lot of online meetings. I was hanging out with the North Carolina Sangha, and I had an old timer call me out on it. And at that point, like when I first got to Buddhist recovery, I was all about wise effort, wise action, wise mindfulness, wise concentration, wise speech, like just give me action items, give me things to do, give me like daily effort, like let's go, go, go. I wanted to get sober. I was going to make this happen. And I remember just, in my early sobriety enthusiasm, talking about that, or early Buddhist sobriety enthusiasm, talking about that. And, an older gentleman called me out and he's like, James, before you get all about that wise effort, that wise action, that wise speech and wise concentration, what's your intention? What are the intentions behind your actions? Are you really sitting with what your compassion, your intentions are? Are you approaching every single morning, every single day with wise intention, with kindness, with compassion, with generosity? And it was a really interesting aha moment for me as you go through this chapter, and as I went through it myself, and as we share on this chapter in the in-person meetings more and more often. This is the chapter where we start to realize that this is a practice that we take off the cushion. Like the meditations are great, the meetings are wonderful, but this is really a practice that we can take into the rest of our lives. I remember there's a lovely, wonderful gentleman at our in-person meetings who didn't know a lick of Buddhism when he first started attending, and not the stereotypical guy who really just took a duck to water to our program. And he jokingly says, like when he's in our meetings all the time, he's like, I just came in here to stop drinking and drugging and get my life together and get my job back. I didn't think I'd be using this every single day. And hopefully that's a good impression. He's going to know who I'm talking about. I love you. I won't say your name, but I love you. And yeah, this is wise intention, approaching all that we do with kindness, compassion, with generosity, with appreciative joy, with forgiveness. As we go through this chapter, these are the themes. The main themes of this chapter are generosity, kindness, compassion, and not just for other people and how we approach the world, but more often than not, the most important individual, and I'll close up on this as we get to the next point. The most important person for us to show compassion for, the most important person we need to show compassion for, especially in early sobriety, is ourselves. And it's a program of learning self-compassion, compassion for ourselves. Probably one of the most important parts of the First Noble Truth of the acknowledgement addiction is suffering. is not just embracing and understanding that addiction is suffering, but meeting it with compassion. Meeting it with compassion and meeting ourselves with compassion rather than guilt and shame, and having that compassion for ourselves to get better. So, this is a long chapter. There's a lot to cover here. It's a very nuanced chapter, probably deserves its own little workshop, but I don't have time for that. So, that's the book definition on the top of page 20. But the other thing I want to cover in today's video, and this is my favorite part of today's video, the 4 heart practices. Heart practices, yeah, the heart practices, also known as the Brahma Viharas. Brahma Viharas. Yeah, let's talk about that. Okay, so the majority of this chapter talks about what is affectionately referred to or known as the heart practices. The heart practices are based off another number of sutras by the Buddha, Uncle Sid, our guy, our dude, who talks about this at length through the suttas. So instead of dragging you through this book and dragging you through like 4 or 5 quotes, like we could just make this a James reading quotes all day video and I could just read the book to you, but you have access to audiobooks, so I don't think that's beneficial to you. And if you and I were here working together as wise friends and having a conversation about this chapter, and you're like, hey, James, what are your thoughts on this chapter? I'd be like, you know what? It's all about those heart practices. Like, it's all about the heart practices. So, what are the heart practices? The heart practices are based off what more technically, technical language, it's technically known as the 4 Brahma Viharas. It's the first of which is metta, loving kindness. The second is compassion. The third is appreciative joy, or sometimes translated as sympathetic joy. The fourth is equanimity. And then the fifth, even though it's not a traditional heart practice and it's not part of the Brahma Viharas officially, for Buddhist recovery communities, forgiveness. Forgiveness is the 5th heart practice that we talk about and that we do in Recovery Dharma. All 5 of these have dedicated meditations in the Beyond Craving 30 Sits in 30 Days course that we also have available to you. All 5 of these are mentioned as guided meditations at the back of the Recovery Dharma book. All 5 of these are mentioned as guided meditations in the Recovery Dharma program, and all 5 of them deserve and merit your investigation and research on, because all 5 of them are wonderful, splendid tools in the toolkit. I think of the heart practices really as tools in the toolkit. You know, sometimes I need a hammer, sometimes I need a screwdriver, occasionally I need a ratchet. Not often. Not often do I need the ratchet, but I keep it in the toolbox. And as you go through here, the first one's appreciative joy, the first one's metta, loving kindness. Metta, loving kindness. Metta, loving kindness, and it's not like I had a monk out at the Bhavana Society out in West Virginia, Monty J, jokingly say, "Listen, metta, loving kindness isn't about like wanting to go out and give everybody a hug. It's a metta-friendly kindness towards all living beings. It's a sense of non-harming and friendliness towards all living beings." So first, there's metta, loving kindness. Second, there's compassion. So when metta, loving kindness, or this general friendliness towards all living beings, meets pain, meets our pain, meets the pain of others, it becomes compassion. It is the, as Jack Kornfield would say, it is the heart's natural response to responding to pain is compassion. Like when we have successfully cultivated metta, loving kindness, and we encounter pain of ourselves or the suffering of other people, we will instinctively and naturally cultivate compassion. And when our heart encounters pleasant things in life, it becomes appreciative joy, gratitude, the 3rd heart practice. And then ultimately, there's the 4th heart practice, was equanimity. Equanimity is a fun word, right? Equanimity is a very Buddhist word. It's a sense of balance. I sometimes jokingly tell new people, think of it like serenity on steroids, or like just superpowered serenity. Equanimity is the 2 analogies that I've read that are most effective in explaining it are, it's like being like an unmovable mountain, or it is like being a noble oak tree with deep, strong oak roots that can weather any storm. And equanimity is it's finding that balance, it's finding that ease regardless of external circumstances. The far enemy or the opposite of equanimity would be neuroticism. So if you know what neuroticism is, and you know what a neurotic individual is, and you know what a hypersensitive person in that regard is, that would be the opposite of equanimity. And again, this is just an intro course. It's an intro conversation on these. Wish I could go deeper. But the fifth heart practice from our practice perspective is forgiveness. Yeah, forgiveness. Ugh. It's a heavy topic, and it deserves its own section of this video. So yeah, those are the heart practices. They can change your life. They certainly changed my life. Actually, to share one other personal story before we get into forgiveness, I will say, as someone who grew up with a lot of toxic masculinity, as someone who grew up very isolated at times, and internalizing things and doing a lot of rumination, um, these tools are the greatest tools in the toolkit. These heart practices will change your life. These are the other half of a traditional Buddhist meditative practice. We talk about this in the meditation videos, but the four foundations of mindfulness are talked about in Wise Mindfulness in one of the next videos. But these five heart practices, these five meditations, investigate them, explore them, cultivate them, as these are five tools in the toolkit that really help us not just stay dry, but these are the five heart practices that we use to heal ourselves in recovery. The big difference between a Buddhist approach to recovery and other practices is that within our practice, this is a systematic retraining of our hearts. These are tools and techniques that are time proven to help us heal our wounds and heal from the suffering of addiction. So if you find yourself in a bad place, if you find yourself suffering from addiction, these are five tools in the toolkit that if you take time, if you have patience, and you develop, cultivate, and grow them, they can help you alleviate the suffering of addiction. So we'll probably have future videos on just the heart practices, but I think that's a good enough introduction. Let's talk about forgiveness. Okay, forgiveness. Yeah, forgiveness. We're going to do some reading at this point. We're going to read a bunch of paragraphs here. So buckle up, and then we'll have a conversation on forgiveness. Bottom of page 23. Generosity, compassion, and loving kindness make forgiveness not only possible, but also essential for recovery. That's right. Forgiveness is essential for recovery. Forgiveness rests on understanding and caring about the pain and confusion that give rise to actions that we experience as harmful. We forgive when we focus on the person rather than the action. We forgive only in the present when our hurt and anger make us aware that our resentment is blocking our own compassionate and generous responses. In this part, next part I have highlighted in orange. Forgiveness is not so much something we are giving to the person who hurt us, but something we give to ourselves. It's centered more on our own conscious intention and how we choose to respond to them. Just as we sometimes act out of fear, greed, and confusion, we see that others do too. Forgiveness does not mean we accept or tolerate harm. It does not mean we accept or tolerate harm. It comes from understanding and accepting that the person causing us harm is doing so from a place of pain and confusion. We extend compassion and goodwill to that person. Even as we actively try to end the harm, this may mean creating safe boundaries or removing ourselves from exposure to harm. But we do this from a place of compassion and understanding, not resentment. It is essential, essential that we extend the healing of forgiveness and compassion to ourselves. Forgiveness allows us to let go of the guilt and shame of our own harmful actions. We remember that compassion is an action. Compassion is an action, so when we forgive ourselves, we set an intention not to recreate or continue the harm we have caused to others or to ourselves. And this is the last part I'll highlight. Making amends is an important part of forgiveness. As we begin to gain clarity about the harm we caused in our addiction, we commit to making amends for the harmful behaviors. We don't make amends for the sake of satisfying some external standard of morality to be forgiven or to get something in return. Instead, we use the process as a way to let go of our expectations and disappointments in others and ourselves. In other words, we let go of our attachment to a different past. Yeah, we're letting go of a different attachment to a different past. Forgiveness is by far the most nuanced, most sensitive topic of the Recovery Dharma program. It is most nuanced and sensitive and personalized topic of self-exploration and recovery. I don't think any one book does it justice. It is essential to recovery. It's essential to finding peace and ease in long-term recovery. I love the line at the end that it says, instead, we use the process as a way to let go of our expectations and disappointments in others and ourselves. In other words, we let go of our attachment to a different past. And I really do find a lot of refuge in the line that says forgiveness is not so much something we are giving to the person who hurt us, but something we give ourselves. It's centered more on our conscious intention and how we choose to respond to them. Forgiveness. Forgiveness is something that we do for ourselves. Forgiveness is one of my favorite lines in forgiveness meditation from a Buddhist teacher who's familiar with recovery is as we go through the forgiveness process, he'll often use the line, please forgive me as much as you can in this moment. Or when he goes through the lines, I forgive you as much as I can in this moment. I think just having that sliver of a door open of the forgiveness process and learning the concepts of acceptance and understanding that this is going to be a gradual process. And forgiveness isn't something that it's a one and done process. I think that's one of the biggest confusions on forgiveness, that forgiveness is something that we'll often have to forgive ourselves and forgive others repeatedly, even though we may have thought that we have forgiven them previously. And the best analogy on forgiveness as we go through the amends process and discuss its importance is a quick little story from Jack Kornfield from The Wise Heart, who Jack Kornfield works with a number of veterans with PTSD issues. And the two veterans, as the story goes in The Wise Heart, they're meeting up after 30 years of being out of the POW camps from war. And these are two individuals that were in prisoner of war camps for about 4 to 5 years, is my understanding. And as they're meeting up, having been out of the camps for 30 years now, the one gentleman says to the other, friend, have you forgiven our captors for what they did to us in the camps all those years ago yet? And the other gentleman goes, no, I cannot forgive them. I will never forgive them. What they did was unforgivable. I will never forgive them. At which point the first friend says, that's a shame, brother. It sounds like you're still a prisoner. So I think that story encapsulates much of the concept that forgiveness is something that we give ourselves. And it is very much this idea of instead we use the process as a way to let go of our expectations and disappointments in others and ourselves. In other words, we let go of our attachment to a different past. So that said, we will have one last section of this video. Let's talk about doing the inquiries, and let's also talk about amends before we call it a day. Okay, so we'll wrap up on this. Instead of doing a homework assignment, quote unquote, this week, look at pages 25 and 26 of the inquiries and amends. Read through all of them. Read through all these. You don't need to do them right away. You don't need to dig into these right away. But this is the heavier lifting of the inquiry work. You might want to wait till you're 3 or 6 months in before digging too deep into amends work. Pro tip on amends, always, always, always talk to a wise friend, a counselor, or an outside party about making amends before going with the best of intentions, blindly with the intention of making amends with good intentions and unintentionally harming others. So go through the inquiry questions. I'll read through these real quick as far as the ones I like. The, you know, Inquiry of Wise Intention, page 25. What compassion or forgiveness can you offer when someone's intention is good, but their impact is harmful? If it doesn't feel safe or appropriate to offer this directly to the person, how can you bring that forgiveness into your own heart so you don't have the burden of carrying it? I like that. During your periods of active addiction, how did you act in ways that were clinging, uncaring, harsh, cruel, or unforgiving? Towards whom, including yourself, were these feelings directed? How might generosity, compassion, loving kindness, and forgiveness have changed your behavior? That's a good one. What actions have you taken that have harmed others? Yeah, if we were working together as wise friends, that's something we'd be discussing over these fireside chats. Uh, have you formed an intention to reconcile with both yourself and the person or people you've harmed to make amends? If so, have you found a wise friend or mentor you can go to for guidance and support in the amends process? That's a great pro tip. Always talk through your amends process before doing them, which is summarized below. What support can this person provide you as you begin the process of amends? Making amends. Have you done something intentionally that you now recognize caused harm to another who has been harmed by your actions? And then also, have you honestly formed the intention to not repeat harmful actions, to learn from the experience in future interactions? Have you begun the process of directly addressing the harmful actions of your past? And there's a full list of them that I'm not going to read through on page 26 as well. So that's Wise Intention. It's a big chapter. It's a wonderful chapter. There's a lot of wonderful things that I left out of this video. So definitely read this section on Wise Intention. Generally speaking, as you look at all eightfolds of the Eightfold Path, wise intention is it's behind our effort, it's behind our actions, behind our speech, our concentration, our understanding. Definitely understand the heart practices, understand what the Brahma Viharas are. These are tools in the toolkits, and this is where the healing begins. And ultimately, look at the forgiveness portion and look through the inquiries and talking about amends. This is where forming, your connections with Y friends and finding your sangha of support really helps deepen your practice. So next week we're going to get into wise speech. Wise speech, that's right. We're going to talk about wise speech. And fun fact, did you know there's 4 types of lies? That's right, there's 4 types of lies. And unless I'm lying about that, he might be. I don't know. Let's find about that in the next video. See you now.